Who is on the roster bubble for the Dallas Cowboys, and will they make it? We'll tell you next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is right around the corner, so visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. And on today's show, we're going to start looking at the 53-man roster for the Dallas Cowboys. We're less than a week away from cutdowns. The Cowboys have to get down to 53 players next Tuesday. And what we're going to do today is look at some of the players that we think are absolute locks on both sides of the ball to kind of come up with a list of the guys that we think might be on the bubble. And Landon, it's not too hard to get to like 42, 43 players. It's just those last 10 that are always a little tricky.
Yeah. And I mean, that's good. Like, it's good that you've got, 40 solid players, or at least 40 contracts is probably the best way to look at it, that you definitely want to have on your team next year. This is going to be a group. I want to just kind of be clear here that this isn't, when we look at this document, this isn't going to be a depth chart, right? Like, some of the guys that may not be on this list may play ahead of guys that are on this list. It's just about who is, especially in regards to some of these rookies, right? You want those rookie contracts. You want those guys on their team. Those guys are locked to make the team. That doesn't mean they're locks to play on the field for the Cowboys on Sunday. So lots of just interesting names here. And then we kind of have to fill in the rest, right? 11 names to figure out exactly who the rest of the Cowboys are going to be.
All right, so let's start with the Cowboys offense. And if you're watching with us on YouTube or wherever you're watching us, you can see a visual that Landon put together of the Cowboys offense. So we'll kind of run down through the group. We'll start with quarterbacks, Dak Prescott, Joe Milton, Will Grier. That's three quarterbacks. Maybe, I could see a situation where they only keep two and have Will Grier in the practice squad. But because of some of the things you can do on game day, Landon, it makes sense just to have three on the roster.
Yeah, and also, Grier is your de facto backup quarterback at this point, so you probably want to make sure that you're holding on to him just so somebody doesn't try to steal him off your practice squad just to hurt you.
Yeah, and the other thing is, and we need to talk about it, Dak Prescott's not been the most durable quarterback over the last 5 years, so I think it makes sense to have three quarterbacks on your team. Joe Milton's your long-term backup, at least we think so. But Will Grier is probably the guy that comes in to finish out games, gives you spot starts. But so three quarterbacks. I think the more interesting one here is the running back position. And this is something that we touched on during yesterday's show. Javonte Williams, Jaden Blue, and Hunter Lipke. And those are the only two running backs that we think are locks to make the roster right now.
Yeah, I think, because of the changes in the practice squad and the call-ups that you're allowed to have and the qualification changes of who's allowed to be on the practice squad, I think it's allowed a lot more roster flexibility for these teams. And ultimately, at positions like running back, where you want to kind of be, have some depth there, and you can, there's so many quality running backs, guys that you could pick up off the street and have, have them carry the ball a couple times without, killing you. I think that it makes sense to stash some of these guys in your system on your practice squad just to have them around your roster, call them up as needed, especially if you're talking about a running back 3 spot, right? Like, I just think it makes a lot more sense than trying to hold on to one guy, unless there's like a specific special teams ace that's a running back 3. It makes sense to kind of just keep the guys that that you have to keep, you want to hold on to, and everybody else can kind of just be called up as needed from the practice squad.
I won't be surprised if they have three running backs plus Hunter Lipke on the roster like the Monday before they play the Eagles, right? But I also won't be surprised on cutdown day if it's only those two and Lipke, and then they try to figure out other options, whether it's maybe making a waiver claim or signing a veteran. That's just the way I think the Cowboys are going to play it, but we'll see.
Yeah, a guy like Miles Sanders, vested vet, I mean, so if you cut him and you want him to hang around, like you can just ask him, say, hey, if you don't get picked up, just stay right here. And again, running back's another position where there's just going to be a lot of bodies on the market at all time, even after cutdown. So you just are more likely to get that guy back onto a practice squad than maybe some of the other positions.
All right, let's look at the pass catchers. So we've got CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, Cavante Turpin, and I think because of the Jonathan Mingo injury, I think Jalen Tolbert is probably a lock at this point. And then you've got 3 tight ends here: Jake Ferguson, Luke Schoonmaker, and Brevin Spanford. That's 7 pass catchers. My guess is that by the time we get to the season, it'll be closer to 9 or 10, probably 10. But I think this is a good group of like the guys that we know are going to be on the team for sure going into week 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Tolbert, he's still on a rookie deal, so he's still cheap. And I think with the way he produced last year, even if Mingo is here, I think you probably retain Tolbert. He didn't have like a terrible camp. He just certainly didn't stand out. Didn't have the camp that he had last year.
And he didn't
But he's
maybe
got
take the step that we were
yeah,
hoping that he would, right?
for sure. And but I think he still has pedigree or he still has experience with Dak. He still has some pedigree in the fact that he was a 600-yard receiver. He led the team in touchdown receptions last year. So I do think that there is, that's enough to kind of secure your roster for your last year on your rookie contract at least. And we'll see what happens after that.
The thing that I'm really interested in, we'll get to this a little bit later, is who are wide receivers 5 and 6 here? We think Jonathan Mingo is going to go on the injured reserve list to start the year, meaning that he's going to miss the first 4 games. Does that mean someone like Ryan Flournoy makes the roster? Does Trayshawn Holden make it? I kind of think Jalen Brooks, I wouldn't say he's a lock, but I think he's kind of that next guy up because he's played in a lot of big games and he plays on special teams. But would I be shocked if any of those 3 are not on the 53-man roster? Of course not.
No, I mean, we did hear the other day that Flournoy was getting some work with special teams coaches to kind of get him ready for that sort of stuff to see, I think, potentially if he could be someone to make the roster. But again, I think all those conversations that we've been having these last few weeks about what the true role of wide receiver 5 and 6 is, they come into play here. It's going to need to be a special teams position mostly, and then the fact that you can play wide receiver is a benefit unless they are planning to specifically make you the game day inactive week in and week out. Maybe if they really do like Trayshawn Holden a lot more than we expect, maybe that he's a guy they hold on to and then just are planning on stashing for the entire year as an inactive.
Hold on to Trayshawn Holden.
God.
All right, never mind.
Mine.
That's all right. Let's go do the offensive line. So for tackles, we've got Tyler Guyton, Terrence Steele, Nate Thomas, Johnny Cornelius, who I kind of like a little bit. And then for the interior guys, you've got your starting guards, Tyler Smith, Tyler Booker, and then TJ Bass. And then for your centers, you've got Brock Hoffman and your starters, Cooper Beebe, of course. So that is what? That's 4, 7, 9. My guess is they keep 10 offensive linemen. But I think those 9 are pretty safe here.
Yeah, I mean, unless one of them ends up getting moved off for a trade in some way, just because there is a lot of decent depth here, that certainly could be an option. And Cornelius is kind of an example of what I was talking about before we started this, of a guy that this isn't a depth chart. I don't know that he would be the second tackle off the bench, but I think he's more likely to be on this team than for certain, like a guy like Hakeem Adeniji or La'el Collins or some of these other guys who may actually end up playing, if they're on the roster, may actually be ahead of him on the depth chart. But Cornelius is such a young talent on a cheap deal, rookie deal. You are more desperate to hold on to that contract than you are to say, Adeniji or any of those guys individually.
I don't know if you saw some of the injuries across the NFL, but we had several offensive linemen, like starting level offensive linemen, that went down with season-ending injuries on Wednesday. And even someone like Hakeem Adeniji, who we don't love, but he's got a lot of starts in the NFL. I think he's somebody that you could flip for a 6th-round pick, and you do that enough times, that's how you start to really rack up draft capital.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, this is not to speak ill. I think Hakeem Adeniji has had actually a pretty good camp.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and so I do think that there is a possibility that a team might come knocking and say, "Hey, we heard he's back. We heard he's looked pretty decent in camp. What are you interested in flipping something for him?" So certainly a possibility.
All right, let's talk about the defensive guys that we think are locks to make the 53-man roster. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. And for just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or you're ready to crown a Super Bowl champ before week one even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer on the MVP race. I kind of like Joe Burrow. I think he's going to put up massive numbers again this year because that Bengals defense isn't very good. Or maybe you can go out and parlay your favorite division winners. Like maybe you take a team like the Cowboys to win the NFC East. We know that nobody repeats in that division ever. So nice little dark horse there. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are discussing our roster locks, and we should have mentioned, Landon, at the top. I believe that was 22 guys on offense that we said were locks to make the roster. Is that the number that we had?
Yeah, let me just check. Yes, it is. 22 was the number of players we had on offense.
Okay, so 22. So keep that in mind. Let's go to the defensive side, and let's look at the pass rushers. So we've got Micah Parsons when he returns, assuming he's not traded. They're not trading him. Dante Fowler, Marshawn Nealand, Sam Williams, and Donovan Ezeraku. Those are your 5 locks, and it feels like those guys have been locked in for a while. But that also leaves quite a bit of talent off the roster right now.
Yeah, Williams is the guy that it feels like everyone's trying to get me to cut off this team. I don't know, man. It's still a pretty decent contract, and I still think he's a good player. I think James Houston is the guy that, I couldn't quite bring myself to bring in as a lock, because I don't think he's necessarily a lock, but I do think that they will try to get him on this team one form or fashion, whether that's by, and that's the other thing I want to throw out here with all these guys that are on this list. I think that these guys are locked to be on the roster unless they get traded. Right, like anyone.
I think that's fair. They're not getting cut. Like they're locks to not get cut. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So I think some of these guys, they're valuable pieces. The contracts are valuable. So the Cowboys are not willingly letting go of it, but they are probably willing to trade for the right price. So that probably applies to some of these pass rushers. Maybe it applies to offensive linemen. Maybe it even applies to a guy like Mozzie Smith. As we talked about, who's on this list. That I think is a lock to be on the team, simply because of the stuff that we talked about yesterday. It's going to cost you money to get rid of him, and you also still have a depth issue if you get rid of him.
All right, so let's talk about Mozzie Smith, because on your list for defensive tackles, you have Osa Odighizuwa, Solomon Thomas, Mozzie Smith. That gives you 8 defensive linemen right there. At least we know from the Cowboys' previous history that they're always rated around that 10 mark. And that makes sense, Landon, because they're going to have to add 2 more defensive tackles, whether that's based on guys they have currently on the roster, right? Jay Toya, Perrion Winfrey, or veterans that they go out and sign or claim off waivers. Like, I would be shocked if they have fewer than 5 defensive tackles on this roster before week 1.
Yeah, I think 5 sounds right to me, right? Like probably these 3, unless, something happens where they trade Mozzie, and then they'll probably get a veteran guy, like some other one more probably top end nose tackle to kind of put at the top of that rotation, and then whether it's Perrion Winfrey or some other kind of back end of the rotational defensive tackle, they'll probably carry a 5th defensive tackle just to make that group have enough depth for what they need.
Now let's go to the secondary, because I think the secondary is where it gets really interesting. We'll get to linebackers in a second. I'm saving those guys. Secondary on the list, you've got Deron Bland, Kyrie Elam, and Israel Makamu. Now we did get a video from Trayvon Diggs on Wednesday night where he said he hopes to play by week 2 or week 3. We're not factoring him into this list yet, because I still believe if Diggs thinks he's ready for week 2, week 3, the Cowboys will probably leave him on PUP, give him another month to get ready, and then we'll see him in week 5. But Deron Bland, Kyrie Elam, Izzy Mukamo. And then at safety, you've got Malik Hooker, Donovan Wilson, Wanye Thomas, and Marquise Bell. That's 7 defensive backs. We know the Cowboys usually keep about 10. But I do think those are the 7 that feel the safest right now.
Yeah, and again, I just want to remind everyone like what this list is. Like this list is a list of guys that we think are locks to be on the roster in that form of like actual on the roster. So the reason I didn't include Diggs is like Marcus mentioned, we're just not sure exactly if he's going to be on a list. He's definitely going to be a Dallas Cowboy. He's not getting cut. He's like I don't think he's getting traded. So I think it's more. So. We don't think so, but I think it's more about is he going to be on the roster or will he be on one of these other lists? And then yeah, I think you kind of cobble together the rest of those names on that list. I think Elam I put in there as a guy that they're definitely going to keep just because at this point he's starting for you week 1. With even with the most optimistic timeline for Diggs, he's not coming back week 1. So Elam is definitely a guy who's made the team. Bland is Bland, so obviously he made it. I kind of as we get closer and closer to week 1, I kind of wonder if Booth isn't a guy that has definitely made the team or not, just because of numbers that they need there, especially for week 1. But I think as it stands right now, McQuamu is the only other guy that I'm certain is going to be on the team just because they re-signed him earlier. He's been playing all over the field, and I think he's likely to be your week 1 starter at nickel unless something changes.
And again, we think Marquise Bell is going to be on the team because of special teams. He also he can play a lot of different positions, which is important, right? You need these guys that can help out in special teams, that can come down and play linebacker for a half if you need them to. And he can cover tight ends and he can play in the slot a little bit. So I do think he's someone that makes the roster. But I wanted to talk about the linebacker position here, Landon, because you've got 4 linebackers: Jack Sanborn, Maris Leofau, Shamar James, and Damone Clark. But one name you don't have is Kenneth Walker. Why don't you think he's a lock to make this team?
Yeah, I mean, I just think when they signed Kenneth Murray at the beginning of the season, it was a situation where we wondered kind of why they had done it at that point because they had already signed Sanborn. We felt like they paid a lot of money for a guy who we kind of knew who he was, as a player in the NFL. He had bounced around. This is now his 3rd team in the NFL, and you wondered, is that the best the Cowboys could have done at the situation? You've flash forward to training camp, and suddenly you're hearing about all these linebackers popping. Leofau playing really well, Damone Clark playing really well. Obviously, they like Shamar James a lot. So, and I think it's because you started hearing all this positive talk, and while Kenneth Murray was away on paternity leave, it just felt like, hey, is there an opportunity here for the Cowboys to kind of go young at this position, save some money, maybe save a roster spot, and then you could go deeper at other spots? Because I think that the Cowboys are going to start looking at some of these spots and start to realize, like, hey, is Kenneth Murray like $7.5 million better than Maris Leofau, or a combination of Maris Leofau and Damone Clark? I don't know. So I think those are the kind of questions they're going to ask. So I just did want to like write him in as pin because I think the other linebackers have played so well. Maybe they've made him obsolete.
And if it's close, you might just say, okay, let's move on from Kenneth Murray. Let's release him. I think they can save $6 million. And then if nobody picks him up, nobody's going to claim him, right? Nobody picks him up. Maybe you bring him back on the practice squad, or you sign him back to the 53-man roster at a reduced number. But man, when you're having to pay, Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and hopefully Micah Parsons soon, $6 million for one linebacker that you feel like is kind of similar to everybody else you have on your roster, that's not a bad way to pinch some pennies.
Yeah, again, and you also have a linebacker whisperer as your defensive coordinator. You feel like he's going to be able to coach these guys up. And I think there's kind of a little proof in the pudding just based on the way these linebackers have played so far in the training camp and preseason. So, lean into that. You've got Sanborn out there. Overshown is coming back. Do you really need Kenneth Murray at $6.5 or whatever it is $1 million on the line there?
All right, so that's 19 defensive players that Landon has a lock to make the 53-man roster, and 3 special teams players: Trent Sieg, Brandon Aubrey, and Brian Anger. That means there's 9 players fight over 9 spots that these players are fighting for. We'll talk about some bubble players and whether or not we think they make the roster. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you could end up leaving money on the table. But that is where Monarch Money comes in. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. My family has been using Monarch Money for at least 10 months now, and it's unbelievable how much we've been able to cut back during those 10 months. So go take control of your finances and don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That is 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. NFL NFL fantasy draft season is here. So make your second listen. I know Landon's so excited. The Locked On Fantasy Football podcast with host Vinny Iyer and Michelle Majuk. Listen every day to prep for your fantasy draft and become the most informed manager so you can take home your league's trophy this season. Find Locked On Fantasy Football on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, so we've got 9 spots open, right? At least we think. Let's talk about some players, whether or not we think they make the roster or not. So we've got, go ahead, 9. You're good.
I just want to point out at the top of this, we had 19 total players on defense, 22 players on offense. And to me, what that says is that the offensive spots are very much set, it feels like. There's only a couple spots here and there on offense to haggle over. And when you think about how many players play on defense, that just shows you how wide open things are on the defense, especially in the back end. I just wanted to point that out as well.
No, you're good. And I think this is where I'm thinking there's only 3 spots on offense, right? I think to get to 22, which is about the number the Cowboys keep every year. Do they keep a third running back outside of Hunter Lipke? Do they keep they're going to keep 5 receivers, but do they keep 6 receivers? And then who is that last offensive lineman? Is it Sadiq Charles? Is it Akeem Adeniji? Is it Awesome Richards, who we didn't put on the list? It feels like those are the spots that the Cowboys are going to be targeting.
Yeah, it feels like the Cowboys are going to have to try to find a way to go long at offensive line, I think, especially early, just because that's where their talent is, right? And those are such valuable pieces. You can't just let offensive linemen are the one spot where if you think that they're going to get gobbled up off the street, they're not going to make it to your
They're not
going to
make it back to you. No.
The offensive line is so deep, is so shallow in the NFL right now. Any quality offensive lineman on a contract that can be claimed is getting claimed off a waiver wire. It's not running back. Okay. So I think the Cowboys may go long at that position. You talked about Awesome Richards. We talked about Adeniji, a guy that has started games in the NFL. You probably end up going long there just to make sure. You may end up trading one of these interior guys because I think you can get so much value for him, and you've got a lot of them. So I think it could be that the Cowboys go a little bit long at offensive line with the eye towards maybe trading someone for another piece at another spot or just for a draft pick.
All right, let's go on to defense. We already mentioned we think they're going to add some defensive tackle talent, so let's kind of ignore that. James Houston, you've got 5 defensive ends on the roster right now. It's going to be a struggle to make it, but we even got guys like Ernest Brown, who's been playing well, Tyra Sweet, who's not on the roster, Peyton Turner, who the Cowboys signed us offseason. All those guys are off. Can James Houston make it?
Yeah, Brown is more of a defensive tackle, I think, is at least how they're probably going to consider him. The Houston question is tough, man, because it's like, you know, they've got so much talent. They're 5 deep there without Houston. Do they need a 6th defensive end? Now, the thing that is working for them in this situation is that, first of all, there's some versatility on those defensive ends. Some of them can play inside a little bit as needed on certain sets. They also are very valuable now in special teams in a way that they weren't necessarily in previous years because of the change in kickoff rules. It just makes that body type more viable than, like, let's say, cornerbacks used to be. So I think that helps you. And the Cowboys also were doing a lot of 5-man surface stuff. So they are trying to win one-on-ones and get upfield. But, man, going 6 deep at that position is tough. So this is another position where I think if you shop around or if teams are looking for edge depth, the Cowboys probably could move off one of these guys. I think to me, Sam Williams makes the most sense simply because he's on the last year of a rookie deal, and those are obviously the most palatable kind of trade situations. But he's also coming off an injury, so the question is like, how do you balance that?
All right, one more spot, and it's that nickel cornerback spot that we've been highlighting for a while. It seems like it's going to be. We didn't put Andrew Booth in that list, but I think he will be on there. It seems like it's coming down to Keemon Hall and Zion Childress, or somebody else they might sign as a free agent, or whatever. If it comes down to those two, who do you think the Cowboys keep?
It's tough, because I think Zion Childress offers you an opportunity to give you some upside there because he's young and he's talented. They're clearly considering him for the spot. I think whoever it is, they're probably going to rotate that spot with McQuamu, right? I think McQuamu is going to be heavily involved in there. The question you have is, who do you think you can get to the practice squad safely? Defensive backs it's kind of an iffy spot to try to sneak through the practice squad. There's a lot of need there. Slot only guys aren't quite as valuable as guys who can play outside. But, Keemon Hall has experience playing in the NFL. I don't know that there was a ton of demand for him, on the street when he was a free agent. So maybe you could keep the young guy because there's potential, there's hawking eyes there, and see if Keemon Hall could sneak through waivers and end up on your practice squad.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. He is Landon McCool. I am Marcus Mosher. We'll see you right back here on Friday to get you ready for the Cowboys' final preseason game of the year.